Hey guys, it's another beautiful day. I hope you're doing well. Today we're looking at the Bianchi E-Omnia T Type, and this is the speed version. We are in the United States. This product exists in Europe. T Type stands for trekking, and over there they have the Bosch Performance Line CX. So you still get 85 Newton meters of torque, but your top speed might be 25 kilometers per hour, 15.5 miles per hour. This bike is pretty cool. The guys at Bianchi were having a press event. I missed it, and Bosch was able to kind of hold over one of these prototype. It's kind of like a pre-production, but very, very, very close to the end product. You might notice as we do the review over here, some of the letters are sort of missing, and there's supposed to be additional armor right here on the down tube, which to me is amazing because it already has like quite a bit of, you know, flair going on here with these angular plastic accents, and they do provide some protection. This has an integrated rear rack. I do not know the maximum weight capacity on that, unfortunately. Usually it's something like 25 kilograms, 55 pounds. It has this proprietary interface. It looks like a kind of a quick connect for maybe some panniers or trunk bag or something. One of the things with these proprietary racks is that you can make the bike look awesome. You can have this like fender system and everything, but when it comes to adding maybe like a child seat that clamps onto the side, I don't know, maybe it would work, maybe not. Maybe you'd have to remove part of the plastic. It is a two-piece shield, so keep that in mind. It doesn't have the up window. It might not work with some of the quick clip-on panniers that you see from like Ortlieb and the like, but otherwise this is a really great kind of a commuting platform that to me is kind of a go anywhere e-bike, right? It's got this beefy, longer travel, 120 millimeter spring suspension fork up front. It's got thicker stanchions. It's got some good adjustment over here, hydraulic lockout preload, tapered steer tube, so you could upgrade that to an air fork if you wanted, but it's boost hub spacing, 110 millimeters up front with a 15 millimeter through axle. In the rear we have 148 millimeter boost hub spacing. So this is like straight up hybrid electric bike. Hybrids, you're kind of taking like a city bike and you're mixing some of those mountain biking components and design elements. Relatively flat bar, but then we have this adjustable angle stem. So things like that, it's, you know, it's really interesting to see, and I like how tight and clean the rear rack is. I like that it's the same color, but in terms of utility, there's just a little bit of a trade-off. I mean, this bike is gonna go fast, it's gonna give you some comfort, some off-road capability, it's beefy. Like, just look at these wheels. This Veloman brand, by the way, it's all over the bike. You can see it there on the stem and on the saddle and everything. And I think that must be Bianchi's like in-house brand. They've labeled everything that way. But when you really get closer, you can see, oh, this is actually a WTB rim. Okay, that's cool. And, you know, I think maybe like Velo for the saddle and things like that. As I was studying the bike, even over here on the kickstand, they've got it branded Veloman, but they've got this Ursus label that I'm familiar with. So it feels like when I was double checking and studying all the specs, they used high quality stuff, and I appreciate that. This is a bike that costs $6,000, so it's higher priced. You want to know you're getting some high quality stuff for that price. Bosch, of course, does a great job. This bike has the Performance Line speed motor, so you know, you start out at 40 Newton meters of torque, goes all the way up to 85, and 340% support feedback. It's excellent. It's one of the faster, more powerful mid-drive systems out there. It keeps weight low and center, right where you want it. And I think the motor now is a little bit lighter. This is 4th generation, so it's like 6.3 pounds on that. It's a lot more compact. And the battery, it's fully frame integrated. So we've got the Bosch Power Tube 625. I think it weighs like 7.9 pounds, but really high capacity. You get a lot of range on this thing. So whether you're commuting or maybe you're actually trying to do some touring, this feels like it could be a good platform. Weighs about 62.3 pounds. This is the size medium. It does come in small, medium, and large. I think it's kind of like 15, 17, 19-inch frames. And then they have like a mixedy, kind of a mid-step. So sort of a his and hers combination going on. And they're, you know, again, 62.3 pounds, because of the rack, because of the fenders, because of the fancy integrated lights and the bigger wheels. These are 29 by 2.4, so they're a little bit wider. They almost look like moped tires. They've got that thick, you can just see it, like extra thick contact patch here that might hold up longer and resist thorns and things like that. And I love that it has reflective sidewall stripes. So I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that it almost feels a little bit like a moped. It rides pretty solid. The additional weight takes the jitters out of the bike. It just absorbs that. And then these wheels, since they are 29ers, it's just a bigger diameter and it gives you a lower attack angle. And then with the increased air volume, it just feels comfortable. Like this bike, and maybe it's partially the longer travel fork, 120 millimeters. That's a lot more. A lot of times I'm seeing like, you know, 60 or 80 millimeter suspension fork on kind of the traditional hybrid city bike. Omnia is Latin for everything. Okay, so that's what they were trying to give you, and I think they succeeded. Sometimes it's like, you know, these bikes can get a little bit gaudy if there's too much stuff going on, and then it's all proprietary, and it's like, oh, how are you going to be able to replace it? Bianchi's a brand that's been around forever. It's really well known, especially in the road biking space, and they're doing 3 e-bikes. So they have the T Type trekking, the C Type, it's kind of like city, I guess, and then they have like an FX or an RX, and that's kind of like your mountain bike version. So you can tell, or at least I feel, that this is very mountain inspired. If we come down here to the drivetrain, we have a 32 tooth steel chainring. It's kind of a narrow wide pattern. They call it megatooth. And then there's this FSA aluminum alloy guard. It's going to act as a bash guard down here, but we do have some plastic armor surrounding the motor as well. Standard 170 millimeter crank arms. I'm not sure if these are the pedals that come with the bike, but I like them. They're really big. They give you a lot of stiffness and good traction without being super sharp like an actual mountain bike, you know, adjustable pin pedal. And if we look at the chain coming back this way, this is huge. This cassette, it's a 12 speed, 10 to 51 tooth. So Shimano, not to be outdone by SRAM that has their like 10 to 50, Eagle 500%, they were like 51. So it's like 1 extra tooth on that huge ring, which is great for starting, for climbing. And then of course that 10 tooth, which is excellent for kind of maintaining those higher top speeds. This is a great derailleur, Shimano Dior. It's got the one-way clutch. So in the up position, it tightens it. So it's just not getting as much bounce. And that's kind of a mountain bike thing, but for a speed pedelec like this, it's playing the same role. You know, there's just more vibration, more strain and motion happening throughout the frame. Really interesting to see this too. There's like this, you know, it almost looks like the frame is joined right here. I'm used to seeing that for like a belt drive or something, and I don't really know what's going on. Again, I did try to get like the maximum weight for the bike, for the rack. They didn't have that. I studied as much as I could to get all the other measurements, and I noticed things like no slap guard. It's a black frame, like you're gonna get little silver marks on that if you're chipping the paint off, but maybe that's because this is kind of the pre-production model. I don't really know. If this was my bike, I'd take a piece of clear plastic box tape and I'd put it there so that the chain wouldn't get, you know, banged up over time. If we put this back into the off position, that's going to make it easier to take the rear wheel off and do some servicing. I feel like these tires are going to be fairly puncture resistant. It's a lot easier to change flats on a mid-drive e-bike versus like a hub motor, but it's still, you know, there's some doing, and you need some tools, right? I think that might be a 6mm hex wrench to get that off, and up here it's the same kind of thing. So it's a pretty solid bike. Even if we come to the, look at this, it's like a shim for tightening that seat post. So the seat post clamp it's kind of like this wedge that goes down and tightens versus the one that kind of grabs from the sides. And look at that nice rubber cover they've got. Sort of matches this almost aerodynamic look up here. Again, just a piece of plastic, but it's a mix of like stealthy aerodynamic kind of stuff, but really just beefy. I mean, this adjustable angle stem, 110mm length, that's pretty long. And that means it can go really upright, and you can get that Dutch riding position if you want. Kind of rotate the handlebars a little bit, but these are relatively flat. So kind of a hybrid sort of thing, but also still kind of comfort oriented. 50mm of rise right here, that bottom height. Just very, very cool. Good decision. Like I'm not necessarily complaining about that. These things all do add a little bit of weight, but for comfort, coming back to the seat post, this is 31.6mm, 350 tall. There's plenty of room down here. The frame isn't angling, so you can really drop that down and get a lower minimum saddle height, or, you know, it's a decent standover on this bike. You know, I think 31 inches on the medium, and that's because the 29er wheels lift the whole frame up. So I can do this bike, but I'm glad that they have a mid-step, and I'm really curious if it actually comes in black or if you've got to do white. Coming back to some of the other things, look at this, 3 bolts right here for adding maybe like a bottle cage or a folding lock or something. That's pretty cool. And then they've got 2 more right there, right? Look at that. I'm going to tighten this one up a little bit. And then there's some, maybe that helps you to access some of the cables because they are internally routed. This is totally purpose built, right? It's a pretty fancy bike, and they've done away with the branding on the fork. This is SR Sun Tour. I do have the details for that back at the site. So yeah, interesting. And there's almost like a rubber, I thought there's like a rubber bumper there so that you don't have this oversteer happening where the handlebar can flip all the way around and like pull the cables out and stuff. There's this bumper, but it's built into this cover for the battery. And so that's something I rarely see. Normally this is part of like the metal frame, and you really want it like to be solid, not to be part of this shield. We can get this shield off. It's pretty like tight. It's because it's kind of wedged up at the top. So this is what the shield looks like. It's got a little button at the bottom. The battery, the 625, is mounted in here, and that little locking cylinder corresponds to this ABIS kind of key to like key. This is the plus code one that's nicer. So you could get that folding lock and add it to the bike, or a cable lock or whatever, and then you'd only need one key to do everything. I'm mixed on the Bosch power tube. It's just long, it's kind of got sharp ends. If you do want to add additional batteries to really extend your range, they're gonna stick out of your bag, and they're just, you know, I really like the power packs, but they weren't internal like this. This keeps weight low and center. When you're ready to unlock it, you insert the key and twist it. The battery comes out a little ways, and then you press this little ledge and it kind of unlocks it the rest of the way. But you gotta be careful because there's this fender, and it's just a little tight, and then the battery, you know, about 8 pounds it comes out. There isn't really a handle, so you just want to be careful when you're doing that. And then when you're ready to put it back in, you can't just like click it in. You have to use the key to like unlock it as you're pushing the battery in. And for me, that's so annoying. I mean, the old Bosch power packs did click right in, and they seemed secure and everything. So I don't know why. Maybe it's because this is hanging below the bike. You know, there are several versions of the power tube. One that's like side entry, and then there's the bottom entry. Another complaint I have about this is the charging port location. I mention this frequently. You can see it's right down here on the non-drivetrain side of the bike, right there in the path of the crank arm. So if you're plugged in and you accidentally bump the cranks, you can kind of, you know, sort of push that aside, and it just requires bending down and stuff. I prefer everything to be up high on the drivetrain side of the bike. This is the vulnerable side of the bike that you don't want it to tip this way. So I would like everything right here, and really having to reach up in here and try to find it, it's not a whole lot of fun. I think a lot of people would just leave the battery pack on the bike the whole time and just charge it there. But if you live in a spot where like you can't bring the bike close to a power outlet, it's nice to have a removable battery. And ideally you want to store that in a cool, dry location. Extreme heat can degrade the cells over time and reduce your range. Extreme cold stunts it temporarily, so your range gets cut in half. This is the charger. It's a 4 amp. This is the standard charger from Bosch, and it's got that proprietary interface. It's pretty durable. It's not going to get like cracked if it gets bumped out of place with those cranks. I like it. Weighs about 1.5 pounds, and apparently can charge the whole 625 power tube in just about 5 hours. That's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and try to put this shield back in place, but I want to reiterate again, that's the bumper, and it's just connected to this plastic shield. The shield does not lock to the bike like the battery, so if someone wanted to, they could come and mess with your bike and take this at the bike rack. It's kind of a fancy part. Sometimes I wonder about like how easy is it to replace one of these if it gets cracked because of the oversteer or something like that. And yeah, just getting it back on, you kind of have to shove it up like that and then, you know, push the whole thing into place. I think that's it. And again, there might even be an additional mud guard that connects to that. I saw it in the picture, and they mentioned it. I have been talking to the folks at Bianchi, and you know, they're giving me the best details they can. This has been out in Europe for half a year or something like that, so it's sort of the first time I'm seeing it here in the United States. And overall, it's cooler than I thought. I initially thought, you know, it's all this plastic stuff, like, is it going to be cool? But I feel like they made good decisions. They were all pretty intentional. And even this one up here, that to me it kind of looks like a beak or something, like a bird. This is going to help keep a little bit of mud from flicking up into your eyes if you're riding. This is the kind of thing, normally I'd see it down here on a mountain bike. There's like a shield here and a shield here, and they zip tie on. So to see some of those call outs. So like the off-road being brought into like a hybrid city bike is pretty neat. Okay guys, we're over in the shade. I thought it'd be nice to give you a view of the display. It definitely pops when it's a little bit less bright. And now we can really see those two rear lights. 30 LEDs, tiny LEDs on both sides. It's 60 LEDs, plus the Spinninga Solo in the rear standard light. These do not have brake activation like some of the speed pedelecs. I think that's a European requirement, but since this is the United States, they didn't do that. We've got the headlight, which it's really aimed down. You know, it's definitely, I think it's trying to avoid blinding the oncoming traffic. And then on either side, we've got 21 little white LEDs, so it's sort of B scene and C, which is great. It's up high, so this is, it's sprung. It's not unsprung down here on the arch where it's going to be bouncing around a whole lot and just harder for cars to see. So I appreciate that everything here is pretty elevated. It's very safety oriented. Okay, we're in another sort of dim environment, and I wanted to show you the pattern of that headlight. It's really nice. It's like low, it's straight, it's bright, but because it's built into kind of the head tube of the bike, when you turn, the beam doesn't really turn with you, right? And that is one of the trade-offs when you don't have a light mounted to the arch, which again would be unsprung weight. That's not ideal. It'd be nice if it was up here, but then it kind of crowds the display and stuff. So all things considered, you know, it's a very minor trade-off, but I did want to mention that. Reflective stripes and stuff. And then of course, with a heavier, faster bike like this, we want good brakes. So we've got the Shimano 180 millimeter rotors here, hydraulic disc, and they've got the dual piston calipers, 2-finger levers here, which is kind of a mountain bike thing. Again, you don't really need that much force to actuate these. They're both very consistent and powerful. We do have adjustable reach, so if you've got the smaller frame size or the kind of the mid step, you can bring that in a little bit, and it's gonna work great. They've been doing a good job for me. And one of the other things I noticed about this is that Bianchi went with the magnet here and the reader that's really tucked in. Some of the other Bosch powered bikes I've seen, even the newer ones, they still use the little spoke magnet, which just adds a little bit of a, it's not as symmetrical and it can get bumped out of place and kind of loosen the spokes. So seeing this was really a delighter for me. I'm glad that they went that extra step. And you can even see sort of the dropout axle housing or whatever right here with an additional threaded eyelet for some kind of accessory maybe. It's really cool to see this stuff. I mean, it's very well engineered. It's definitely a higher end product. So we're on the bike here, getting ready to do some riding, and I want to go through the display with you real quick. This is the Bosch Kiox. I really like this thing. It's removable, and they have this custom stem that sort of integrates the display, so it's right there in front of you. It's not sticking up high. It feels like it's really well protected, but this does have Gorilla Glass, and again, the display is removable if you don't add the set screw in the bottom, so you could take that off, and that way if it's parked at a rack or something, people won't be able to tamper with it. I also like that here on the bottom there's a micro USB port, so you could plug in, maybe you're using your phone for GPS or a little speaker or additional accessory. Here we start out, it's in off mode, and we've got this little curly Q sort of a power meter, and it shows how hard the motor is working and then how hard you're working, sort of in combination as you ride, which is really nice. Gives you good feedback in addition to your current speed, and right now it's in miles per hour. Up at the top right, we have a battery percentage, which is very nice because some of the older or more basic Bosch display panels like the Purion, they don't have a percentage. They have like 5 little ticks, and each tick is 20% increment. So this is much better. It's 1% increments. Right now we're at 87%. We can see the lights are active. We can turn them on or off by pressing this button on the right, so it has a dedicated light button. I feel like they've done a good job in making it feel like kind of like a motorcycle. And look at these cool grips where there's these little cutouts and stuff. I've never seen something quite like this. I love that they've got a bell. And it's not a really cheap bell. It's kind of this streamlined, you know, customized. Everything on this bike, pretty customized. So if we get back to interfacing with the display, we've got like a clock at the top left, and we can navigate left or right with these buttons over here. And when we do, we've got a whole bunch of other display readouts. So if we go to the right, we can see clock and range. Range is great because I can, you know, in addition to seeing battery percentage, I can get some real-time feedback based on the last mile of riding and the remaining battery capacity. And this is a very high capacity Bosch PowerTube 625. So if I go to the lowest level of assist, Eco, it changes from gray to green, which is sort of a visual cue if you're, you know, way up here and you're just trying to get a sense for things without actually reading the small print. You can go by color. So we say 66 miles of estimated range if I continue riding like this with only 87% of the battery left. That's great. If I aero up to turbo, which is the highest level, see it drops way down to 23. So I tend to ride in kind of the tour mode a lot and then occasionally kick it up to sport or turbo. And that's 39 miles. It's pretty good. So I'm gonna aero to the right. We got trip distance, trip time, my power in watts, RPM, cadence support. So the really cool thing about all these Bosch Performance Line motors is that they support over 120 RPM, meaning if I downshift, remember there's a huge cassette range here, 10 to 51 tooth, so it's a 501% gear ratio. If I shift down to a lower gear to climb a hill with this, you know, heavier bike, I want the motor to keep up with me, and it can keep up above 120 RPM, and that's wonderful. It's not like the bike slows down before the motor kicks in. And then beats per minute, that's if you use Ant Plus and you're wearing a wireless heart rate monitor. If we aero to the right, we got average speed, max speed, and then it looks like distance, range, my power, heart rate. So it's a lot of the same screens, but they're in a quadrant here. Calories, total distance, and then the end here is like plan a route using the eBike Connect smartphone app. So it does have Bluetooth, and you can have your phone. And again, maybe you wire that in and charge it while you're riding with this high capacity battery. And then it circles around, which is nice. So you don't have to hit back a whole bunch of times. This first menu, it shows the battery, and there's two spots here because some of the Bosch systems actually have two batteries in tandem. That is not this bike. But then we have settings, and there's a whole bunch you can go through. You know, register, screens, you can arrange them, Bluetooth, system settings, information. I've got another video back at ElectricBikeReview.com and kind of on the YouTube channel that goes in depth on all the settings, but I feel like that gives you a good overview. And you know, it's very reachable, very tactile. You can hear this, you can feel it as you're clicking through. It feels very durable as well. And then there's walk mode up here. So if you're in any of the 4 levels of assist and you press walk mode and then hold the plus button, the bike kind of pushes itself along, which is great. Just really slowly. It's nice if you're someone who maybe you loaded the bike up but you don't feel comfortable riding and you just don't want to push it. It is heavy, again, 62 plus pounds here. So you can use walk mode to limp home. Maybe you have a flat tire, or it's a trail that's too steep. These are kind of those slick tires, and you know, off-road is going to be a little bit questionable stuff. While we're down here, I do want to point out the kickstand. It's got a 40mm bolt pattern on the inside of the left chainstay, and it's very adjustable. So in terms of length, they do a really good job. So with that said, I'm gonna hop on the bike. I like to do these test rides in turbo just to get the highest noise feedback. You can really hear that motor responding even though I'm pedaling at a high rate. And it also has shift detection, so it kind of eases off. Yeah. But we're climbing now, and the bike's just really taking me. It's nice to have speed pedelec when you're surrounded by traffic. And then one that's comfortable and kind of heavy like this, it absorbs the vibration between the tires and the suspension. There we go. Feels really nice, even jumping off the curb there. And it's got that suspension built in. You can actually adjust the preload on that suspension post just like you can down here on the left crown. Or you can lock out that fork if you want to reduce bobbing. Definitely more audible any of these performance motors from Bosch, there's a little bit of a whine. It's a rocket. There we go. So again, we've hit 28, a little bit of a downhill section here. Just trying to find something perfectly flat. I might try to climb this over here just to demonstrate. Yeah, it just climbs. Even with the fairly slick tires and that soft terrain, we got good float, we got a good contact patch. So it's kind of a hardtail trail bike, 120 millimeter travel up there again. Through axles, boost hub spacing. It's a pretty beefy bike. We can try to max out that RPM I was talking about before. I'm going to take this all the way up to turbo, so it's the most responsive and powerful. Here we go. So you could probably hear the motor sort of like zzz, and then I topped it. So it's a test I like to do. This is still very, very capable. I don't know of really any other mid-drive system that's much beyond this. 120 plus is sort of the top, and I feel like it's very capable. At that point, if you want the motor support, you need to downshift again. So I'm going to try to demonstrate the shift detection. Just like a manual car, you shift the gears, and then the bike is it's really comfortable, really stable. Hey guys, you're connected to that 31.6 millimeter seat post, and I just wanted to show you the suspension on this thing. It's actually pretty good, and I like that they have the markings so you know how low you can kind of remember, you know, where you had it set to get that maximum comfortable pedal stroke. And then if I flip you around like this, point down to that 38 tooth chainring right there, got that nice aluminum alloy guard, and it's going to protect your pant leg from touching the greasy chain, getting dirty, and it kind of acts like a guide. You know, the chain's not going to fall off outward. It does seem like this is sort of a narrow wide pattern, so that should help as well. And then again, back at the 10 to 51 tooth 12-speed drivetrain, I'm going to pedal along, shift gears, and just wanted to give you a close-up of that motor. I am in turbo. Like many of the performance line drive units, this doesn't actually cycle the chain backwards, but at least there's some friction. And this has really good pickup when you're pedaling. Attention to detail. For the full written review on this bike, check out ElectricBikeReview.com. That's my site. I try to measure everything independently on this, so I weighed it myself. I did the wheelbase, so you know if you've got a platform rack for your car or something, the height, the width, all that stuff's back at the site. And then I have a comparison tool, so you could look at other hardtail commuter trekking bikes and determine whether this is the right one for you, or you're looking for a cheaper one, or maybe you don't need the speed motor. There are more options that way. Again, $6,000 for this thing, USD. I'm really only demoing this bike for a day, right? And I try to be as thorough as possible, but I created some forums and I try to leave the comments as open as possible back at the site. And the idea is it's searchable, it's something that's kind of open source, and you can provide feedback if there's something I got wrong, or maybe something has changed between this like very final pre-production bike that I've got versus the one that actually ships to the store. You can share your feedback about the, apparently there's that mud guard down here. I love to read that stuff. I do this site to help you guys and because I think bikes are awesome. I love you guys. Have fun out there. Ride safe, and we'll see you next time.